For me, I definitely have a process I've been following for a while in that I do a lot of sketching early on. That is really free flowing sketching on as big a piece of paper I can find. I like to use 11 by 17 and no staves. I find there's something really intimidating about the musical staff, at least at the beginning of the process. But there's just a lot of free form sketching, trying to hear things in my head, you know, in silence, away from the keyboard, away from distractions. And actually, you know, it brings up a point. It's hard to find that these days, really a place where you can sit in a kind of silence and really contemplate. So you have to really find not only the place, but the time to be able to do that. Um, so that's the first thing. And the second thing, in the sketching process, um, I have this sort of shorthand I've developed over the years for myself, which in the sketching process, which is a kind of rhythmic and contour sketching. So whatever I'm hearing in my musical ear gets translated onto the page fairly quickly. Um, but just in this sort of rhythmic and contour form that I don't quite know all the details yet, but it helps me at least to get out some of the details quickly over a longer spans of time, um, and then go back and sort of fill in, you know, fill in the details. And this is a process I show to my students too, and some of them take it in and it works, and some of them they have to, you know, it doesn't work and they have to find their own way, which is fine. Every composer sort of has their own process, which is a good thing. Um, but then that leads, you know, later on to more of the detailed stuff. But it always helps me to get a larger chunk of music uh, at least out quickly, and then I can revise things or throw away certain things. Um, I find that if I'm too detail oriented too early on, I get stuck on about 5 seconds of music, and then I feel, oh wow, it's a great 5 seconds, but I have no idea what's coming after that. So it helps me to see the larger picture early on, at least in my own process. I approach different kinds of ensembles a little differently. Um, Although in the end, I think a lot of my music is about um, just nature in general, you know, the nature of time, the nature, there are spiritual aspects to it. Um, uh, I don't know. That's a really deep question, and trying to define one's own sort of character. Um, in terms of approach, you know, with chamber music, I feel I'm often writing for specific people, you know, and that certainly plays into the process. And just about all my music, I think that plays into the process. With orchestral music, it's a little different because you have a large ensemble and sometimes limited rehearsal time. So you're kind of building in, trying to build in a piece that's uh, people are able to put it together with the allotted rehearsal time, you know. So, and then with a solo piece, certainly the personality you're writing for tends to be in that process. I'm a pianist myself, so I I tend to my music tends to be that involves piano tends to be a little bit keyboard oriented. But that's why I like to, in the process, I like to get away from the piano because I find that if I'm too much at the piano, everything I write will be pianistic and not necessarily suited to the instruments I'm writing for. Um, But yeah, I think all of that plays into the process. There's certain pieces in the past, I would say I did that, but I think most of the music I would say that I write now is for a specific purpose, a specific commission, or somebody asked, for a piece for a specific event. Um, but one can't help but, react to the times we live in. So, like the piece I've been writing during the past few months. Um, has certainly been affected by everything that's going on in the world, you know. Um, but in terms of writing music that I don't show to anybody else, I'm trying to think. Usually, I just end up throwing that away. That's part of the process too. If that's part of a piece that this just doesn't work, it gets tossed. So yeah. There are certain pieces of mine I've gone back and sort of made a second version of, like revised. But most of them, you come to the end by being satisfied for the most part with the whole and having a deadline. That's always that's always a good thing. But but even sometimes after premiere performances, I'll go back and revise certain things. They tend to be mostly little technical things like balance and dynamics, and um, not huge revisions. But um, yeah, it's mostly about, okay, I've spent enough time on this project and I have my ending. I'm satisfied. I'm working on the next project now. Um, Otherwise, I think I'd just spend forever in revision. It's always good to have that next project up the line. 10 seconds out of context, like um, for me, can lose its meaning, from the overall context. But thinking back, I guess I would one of the favorite moments I would say is thinking back to the Cabrillo Festival, and when this piece of mine, Fire and Ice, was performed by the orchestra. Um, for me, just hearing that and the last 10 seconds of the piece is this tutti culmination of the whole piece. That certainly was an exciting moment, and maybe one of my best 10 seconds of music. During this pandemic, at least when it first hit, and I'm here in New York, though we are headed back to Houston at the end of the month. So from one place to another, we're doing great now here in New York, and Houston is doing terrible. So we'll see what happens. But in terms of trying to find that space, I found, at least at the beginning of this pandemic, that it was really slow going. Um, Everything was just sort of put on pause, and um, you know, it's hard to find the creative energy within that when you can't help, but be affected by what's going on in the outside world. Um, but for me, I think it's, um, first of all, finding a place um, that you can have actual silence, whether you need to use uh, noise reduction headphones or wherever you can do that. Um, and for me, it's part of, like I said, imagining the performers on stage, being in an audience, and what is that like? And in order to find that, um, that silent space and creative energy, it takes effort. It takes a lot of effort. And that's why it was so slow going at first. Um, but I think, there are certain things that uh, inspire me to keep creating, and one of those things is my students. Being, surrounded when I'm during the school year when I'm teaching, just surrounded by music making. Um, and that's part of the frenetic thing that you have to sort of find the space away from too. But there's a energy to music making, and that feeds on creative energy too. And I think, during the upheaval here with the pandemic and social protests and everything being on hold in terms of performance, there you kind of all of a sudden lost the creative energy of music making. So having all that online now is a way of keeping the community connected, and having that creative energy inspire more music making, and that's all to the good, and we sort of need that, I think, as a music community. I think I probably would have been in the sciences in some field, maybe in astronomy. I'm not particularly good at astronomy, um, but it's always fascinated me, just looking up at the night sky and seeing, um, this vast infiniteness, and um, seeing the different planets, and um, it's always intrigued me ever since I was a kid. And um, if you look at some of my music, it is uh, some of it is scientifically based. I recently wrote this orchestra piece called Luminous Flux, which is about light, both as a particle and as a wave. And it was commissioned by the Scanny Atlas Festival up in the Finger Lakes region of New York. And I was thinking of the light coming off the lake, so it's a very sort of more naturalistic, artistic thing. But I thought about it in a kind of scientific way. And some of my other pieces too, I have this series of orchestral works um, based on various aspects of land, sea, and sky. One is called Strata, which sort of refers to the different layers of the sky um, leading from the Earth's atmosphere into space. Another piece called In Terra, which was actually performed at the Cabrillo Festival, which deals with the different layers of the Earth's crust, um, and the gradual changes that happen over time, not only to the Earth's crust, but to the atmosphere, and how climate change is affecting all of that. Um, and then another one about the sea and the different layers of the ocean. And so it's, I find inspiration in a lot of these things. So I would probably be studying one of these aspects within the scientific realm if I wasn't a composer. Well, for me, the Cabrillo Festival has been such a unique opportunity for so many composers to have their orchestral works played. And the I think the unique thing about it is, it asks what's new in orchestra music, and the camaraderie among, Christy and the performers and the composers, and of course the audience, um, is just so supportive of new music, and that's, I think, what makes it unique. I always remember every time I go there and staying with, different families in the area and getting to know them, and just their contribution and their support for what happens there, and all of this new orchestral music and the music making going on there, um, is you just can't underestimate the impact this has on the music world in general. Because orchestral festivals of all new orchestral works are not that common. So it really holds a special place, not only for me, but I think in for everyone involved, obviously.